Greetings, everyone. This is Payman Lorenzo, your host, your friend, your coach of the Elizabeth podcast. They have another great guest for you for episode. I don't know what episode she is because there's so many, but so many wonderful. I believe she's episode 205 or 206. My good friend, Brooke. We connected about month and a half ago. We had a wonderful conversation. And then she told me a little bit about herself. And I said, you know what? Say no more. I want you to share your story on the podcast. And here she is. So we have so much to cover. I told her just on the first thing that I'm going to mention to you right now, we can do not just an episode, not even a season, but an entire podcast, a book, documentary, movie, whatever you want to call it, even conference. But anyway, there's so much we can talk. Just a little bit about Brooke. She's based in Arizona. She was raised in a cult, Jehovah's cult, for 35 years. That alone, as I said, could be the topic of multiple books, an entire podcast, and so on and so forth. She was raised by a narcissistic father. She's been in narcissistic relationships for 17 years. Again, that can alone be the topic of a podcast just by itself. In 2017, she broke free from both of those. Therapy didn't help her. And in 2020, tragedy struck. She lost the father of her kids to drug overdose. And as a result of that, she lost her faith in God. And however, everything happens for a reason. There's always you know a blessing in everything, even in tragedy. That was what was a spark for her to have her spiritual awakening. And after that, she went all in. She went to school to learn hypnotherapy. She's currently working on writing her book right now, and she's doing wonderful impact out there. That's why she's here, not only because of her story, but also because of what she's doing, which is she's a life coach called Life Coaching Goddess. She, in a nutshell, what she does, she's a mindset coach specializing in hypnotherapy, teaching people the latest neuroscience discoveries to harness the power of their mind so that they can thrive and become the magnet they are, so they can attract to get manifest what they want to live the fullest life. So, anyways, I'm gonna pass it on to her. She has so much wealth of knowledge and wisdom to share with us. Brooke, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. I love the space that you give to give everybody a voice.
Pleasure on mine. That's what I do. That's what I love. I love giving good. I love showcasing people with powerful stories, goosebump inducing stories, and I love to see good people with a good heart and powerful message to win. And that's what my podcast is about. So super excited to have you because, as I said, just on the growing up in a sect, we can do an entire podcast, just me and you talking about that.
Yes,
So this
yes.
so much. I have a feeling my little finger is telling me, my little pinky, and is really wrong, that this might be a 2 or 3 series, podcast between me and you. So, but let's get it one at a time. Once again, welcome, and I'm happy to have you here today.
Thank you so much. Yeah, there is a lot to dive into. I like to really help people, give them more awareness to really kind of the things that are really limiting us. And I know for myself, growing up in the religious sect that I was in really did limit me. And so, in so many ways, right, I was never allowed to be able to process things. I was never able to be able to think about things the way that I should have been able to, kind of decipher what was my truth, right? So I was never allowed to find what was my inner truth. And so that kind of has really been my journey now later in life, right? Kind of figuring out who my authentic self is, discovering what that looks like for me, discovering what I believe, right? What I am allowed to believe and accept. Because I was so mind controlled for so long, and having to be indoctrinated for
All
so
right.
long. So I think that's been really a huge process for me, and a really big growth and lots of discoveries. So it's been interesting to say the
Absolutely.
least.
We'll dive into all of that. But before we do so, for people who don't know you, tell us, who is Brooke as a person and human being? We're going to talk about all of that, your business, your impact later on. But first and foremost, who's Brooke as a person, as human being, for those that do not know you?
Yeah, so I would say that I'm definitely somebody that has changed into a place that I'm very heart centered. I lead that with my business, I lead that with my life, just helping people gain awareness to know that we can always come back to a place of love and realizing that we can accept each other, because I was never accepted for so long in my life. So now I just realized that that's the opposite of who I want to be, right? I don't want to judge. I don't want to not accept people. I want to be able
Mhm.
to have this space where anyone and everyone is accepted by myself. And so I'm also a mother and, entrepreneur, and someone that, really prides myself in being able to be successful in that, and also being able to show my boys that women can be a powerful entrepreneur and really know what she's doing, and have a voice, right?
Exactly. That's all what this podcast and life is about, is sharing your gift, your experiences, your wisdom, the lessons you learned throughout your life with the world. Absolutely. We're going to get into that in a moment. Now, I'd like to start with a series of rapid fire questions to further get to know you. Ready?
Okay, I'm ready.
All
Let's
right.
go.
So tell us, as a person, as a human being, what makes you happy?
Oh, it makes me happy. Actually seeing my clients transform their lives makes me
Mm,
absolutely light up. Seeing them come to me, I really work with a lot of people that are really deep in their trauma, right? I actually work with a lot of women that are recovering from really abusive relationships, and trying to heal that, that inner child, and work through that process, and recover from all of the grief and the loss of the relationship and whatnot. So I see a lot of trauma. So seeing someone be able to begin to have more awareness and gain higher consciousness really lights me up. I find so much joy in that, and it gives me purpose, right? So it's really
beautiful.
taken my pain and put and given it purpose.
All right. Awesome. Now, next question that I want to ask you in this rapid fire series of questions is, what makes you smile?
My children,
Oh, yes.
my voice. Yeah,
Oh,
I mean that's
yes.
just a no-brainer
Oh,
answer for me.
yes. Oh, yes.
They make me smile. Yeah, they really light up my world.
Awesome. Now let's take the happiness factor a couple of notches higher. What makes your soul come alive? What makes your heart sing in a good way?
I would say anytime that I'm able to express myself and help someone gain clarity around a situation, right? Where they've kind of made a story about a situation and they're kind of staying stuck in that. That really helps me, um, because I was so in that type of feeling and emotion and stuck in those places for so long, that when I'm able to help someone else do that, it lights my soul up, right? Because
Beautiful.
I'm able to show them a little bit of their own clarity to how they can actually show up in a little bit differently.
Wonderful. Love that. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, what makes you sad and angry?
Um, I would say what makes me really sad is seeing how people treat other people,
Hmm.
because I see where we come from, a place where we don't accept everyone. We judge people. We really are, we've become like the biggest judgers of other people. And it's really not everybody being really self aware of the fact that every time we judge another person, that's just kind of reflecting back on us, right? And so that makes me really sad, because when we're not accepting of other people, like we're not coming from a place of a heart centered space, we're not really coming of a place of love, and we're hurting each and every person that we decide to do that to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm with you on that 100%.
Yeah.
Now, what scares you?
What scares me? Ooh, that's an interesting one. I would say what scares me is going outside of my comfort zone sometimes, right? I think
Hmm.
sometimes we all really have, we all have a place where we like to stay that's a little comfortable.
Sure.
And then going outside of that comfort zone can really be a scary place to jump into, right? I think that's probably my biggest fear.
I can imagine. Wow. Now, what would you say is your number one personal superpower?
My intuition.
That's a great
Yeah,
one. Yeah.
that is my definitely my superpower. Yeah, I think, and that's, and all a piece of harnessing the power of your mind, right? Being able to access that inner wisdom and that intuition is really kind of all the place that we can all do that, and
Hmm.
in accessing that guide, right, or that inner wisdom, we can create an amazing life, right? Because if we just listen and we stop and we listen to that intuition, we really can go a better direction or path than we probably were if
Totally.
we were ignoring.
So were you always such in tune with your intuition as something that you had to learn and hone in over the years?
Oh, I definitely always had intuition, but I was so traumatized from my past and the way that I was raised and in the relationship that I was in for so long, that I had a hard time listening to it. I couldn't really hear it, right? So I couldn't really decipher between what was my trauma, what was my trigger, what was my PTSD, to
Mhm.
what was my intuition. And so it got very confusing and it became muddled, right? So I really had to work through the trauma and heal through all of those pieces and the PTSD and all of that in order to get to the other side of being able to hear my intuition. And I always tell my clients, I'm like, we're always like kind of working through our healing process, right? Like it's a journey, it's like not a destination, and it's something that we have to continue to work through. And we're always learning how to listen to our intuition better, right? So where I was last year is not where I am this year. Like I feel like I'm
Well,
further along in
not even
being able to
yesterday to tomorrow, you know?
exactly right. Like it's always like this gift of where we continue to keep growing.
And thankfully so, because if you're always the same person, I mean, what's the point of even living, you know?
Right. Yeah, we're always evolving, right? And I think that sometimes we definitely are really hard on ourselves because we become like, we allow that inner critic, right, to like really get super loud sometimes, and we think, oh, we're failing, or we're not doing this right, or we're telling ourselves, something else, and that's where I think a lot of it's come in for myself because I had a lot of that negative self-talk and self-blame and shame and all of those things being raised the way that I was. I had to, pull myself out of that and learn that that was really just my subconscious thoughts and patterns that I had to remove and rewire and come out the other side, right? A different
Yeah,
person.
absolutely. Wow. Now let me ask you about something that I love and I'm sure you love as well. Traveling. I like traveling, right?
I do. I love to travel. That's actually one of my favorite things to do. I love to go
Hmm.
anywhere new. Yeah.
Absolutely. What was the very
Mhm.
first trip you took?
Oh gosh, as a child.
I mean, you can
Gosh,
share whatever you want, whether it's a child, a teen, an adult. You're the star of the show. I'm the host. You decide whatever you want to talk about.
I love it. I would say that one of my most memorable trips was going to Ireland
Oh yeah.
and being able to, yeah, like I would say that's like one of my biggest trips where I was like actually like just like this independent person of like anybody and everybody and was able to like do something for myself. And that was kind of a little piece of my self discovery, right? Like being like, oh, wow, I can actually, journey and do these things for myself and take care of me. And nobody else is doing that for me. I'm doing it, right?
Was that trip to Ireland prior or after your spiritual awakening?
That was actually after my divorce.
Okay.
So after my divorce and after leaving the religious sect, that was post that, and so that was kind of like my first like, oh,
Hmm.
I'm free, right? Like I can do what I want to do, and
Yeah.
that type of thing. So I think that has been wonderful for me. And then after my awakening, every trip that I've taken, it's more of like a place where you come into this with like more gratitude, right?
Sure.
Of the fact that you just look at life differently, you perceive everything
Hmm.
differently, you're more grateful for the things that you do have, and you just learn all the time to be in that space where it's like you find more peace, more contentment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, speaking of travel, let me take it now to a different type of traveling down memory line. Go back to when you were a young girl growing up. You know, when we're kids, people around us, friends, family, teachers, relatives, always ask us, "So, Brooke, what do you want to become when you grow up?" What was your answer as a young girl with that to that question?
Oh gosh, when I was a young girl, I didn't quite know exactly who I was. So it's interesting that you asked that because I was raised to believe within the religious part of it was, oh, I should grow up and I need to be a pioneer, is what they called. And I had to go out door to door, right, and preach what the religion was trying to teach us, right? So that was my job. That was like what we women were supposed to do, and then you would get married and you'd have a baby. You do all the things that kind of society conditions you to do, and that's very much what the religion conditions you to do. And so I never really looked outside of that and thought, oh, I want to be this, or I'm going to be this person, right? So I struggled with that, really finding myself in that space.
Mhm. Now, you mentioned about growing up in a sect. Were you born into that, or was it something that your family got involved when you were a young girl growing up?
No, I was definitely born into that. So that is all I ever knew. I never had the choice to make any actual decisions for myself how to believe. And I always question it, even as a young girl, I'd always ask questions and think that sometimes things didn't make sense. But then again, that was all I ever knew, right? It was the same thing with being raised by the father that I was. I
Sure.
didn't know any difference, so I got trapped in the same type of toxic cycles. So it was the same thing with the religion, right? I was like, oh, this is it. I guess this is the truth. This is what I'm supposed to believe, and I'm just going to stay here and continue this.
Wow. So many questions I want to ask you. We could be here till tomorrow, next week, just talking about that. But let's go step by step. Now, how is it like growing up in such an environment?
Um, it made you feel, and on a deep level, this was something I had to heal. I am still continuing to heal this, is that I wasn't good enough.
Oh,
So
wow.
the religion makes you feel like you always have to do more, right? And if you're not doing more, then you're not showing up good enough. God is probably not really accepting all the things you're doing because you're not really, doing as much as you should, right? You are supposed to put in a certain amount of time a month for, what you do as in your door-to-door preaching. You're supposed to go to, the what they call the kingdom hall or the church several times a week. You're supposed to be active, and if you're not doing those things, then you're kind of frowned upon. You're looked down upon, right? And so with that feeling, you're always feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm not doing enough, and you're feeling a lot of guilt and you're feeling a lot of shame. So those were like the reoccurring themes for me of constantly feeling like that guilt and shame and like, oh, I got to do more. I need to do this. Or if I don't do this, I'm not going to be accepted. And then if I do the wrong thing, I'm not going to be accepted again because I'm going to be shunned and they won't talk to me. I'll lose my friends. I'll lose my family, all of the things. So it's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear that comes into it as well. So it's, living in fear all the time.
Wow. So were you growing up in a kind of like a tight knit, close community? Were you like in a normal city life, but on the side, your parents were heavily involved into the cult, or was it like everyone around you, almost like Amish, for example? That's all you know. You're barely aware of what's going on outside of your community. So how was it? Paint
Yeah.
paint the picture for us a little bit
Picture.
more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I still was raised in what you call suburbia, right? You were just really heavily involved within the church. And you're heavily involved in making sure you're basically kind of in a bubble, right? You're not allowed to be around other people that are not in the organization. So I couldn't hang out with people from school or any
Like your
like that.
neighbors, for
Only
example, your neighbors were all
couldn't hang
part
out
of
with them.
the community, or they were just like any regular people from any neighborhood.
Regular people from any other neighborhood, but I wasn't allowed to hang out with them. Like I couldn't
Wow.
make a neighborhood friend because they weren't in the organization. They weren't part of my religion, right? So we looked at those people as being opposite of who we could be with, right? Like they didn't believe the way we did, so we chose to look at them differently, right? And so that made it very hard because I was just limited to, that small group of people. And that's, how my parents kept it. And so I didn't get to be involved in school activities. I didn't get to
Wow.
be involved in other things. I went to school. I did the religion. I hung out with people in the religion, and that was that, right? And that's all I knew.
So you went to regular schools, or you went even the school was managed by the community?
Yeah, just went to regular schools. Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
So you were
Yep.
not able.
But
You're
I
not
was
a,
always
okay. So you're not able, for example, to hang out, going to activities, sports, drama, whatever, with other students, like
correct.
birthday
So that was really
parties or anything, going to the movies with the
different.
other girls or whatever. No.
Yeah. No, we celebrated no holidays. Those were
Wow.
a off the list. That was something that was considered pagan. We did not celebrate holidays, so I was always left out of those things. So as a kid, I always felt like I was left out, right? Because I didn't get to go to the birthday parties. I didn't get to like participate in having a cupcake. I didn't get to participate in the
Were you
normal things a child
were you allowed to celebrate your own birthday?
does. No, we never
Really?
celebrated any
Whoa.
birthdays. No birthdays. No birthdays. Never got to celebrate any birthdays. Yeah. I
Christmas,
celebrated my
New
first
Year's,
birthday when I
nothing?
was 35. No, nothing.
4th of
Nope.
July, nothing? Wow.
Nothing.
Thanksgiving?
Absolutely. Nope.
Wow.
Nothing. Nothing. Yeah.
Wow.
So like I said, I celebrated my first birthday when I was 35 years old.
So
So yeah.
did you feel kind of disconnected because obviously in class you're still interacting with other students. They talk, oh, I went to my friend's birthday, I went on holiday there, I had this for Christmas. How did that make you feel listening to all these stories of the other classmates?
I will be honest, I absolutely hated that piece. I hated feeling different. Like I would hide it a lot. Like when people would ask me, like, why do you sound like I would try to like it made me feel like I had to hide because I was so ashamed of like having to not be like all of the rest of the kids, right? And so it made me feel very different. It made me feel left out all the time, right? I always felt left out. And a lot of the times I had my parents would tell the teacher, that we were Jehovah's Witnesses and that we would have to go, and if there was a birthday or a holiday celebration, I would have to go sit in the library by myself. So, and the teacher would give me a different, activity to do, but I was always left out.
And the teachers were aware of that. They were okay with that when there was some kind of event or going like field trip or anything.
Well, they didn't really have a choice because
Mhm.
I guess, teachers back then, I mean, they look at it as, oh, this is for religious, belief. And so we have to, accept it and, help her out. But for me, it was like, there were times, honestly, sometimes where I would sneak and have a cupcake or something because, I mean, I wanted to be included, right? So
Sure.
that was the hardest part about being in the religion was the being left out part, right? And not being able to just participate in being a normal kid.
Absolutely. Did they also impose on you to dress in a certain way, or you were free to dress just like any other girl your age, whatever you want?
No, you were not free to dress however you want. So there was really strict guidelines on how we would dress. Not so much like what other some other religious sects are like, but it was more of like we needed to be really modest, and we couldn't wear skirts of a certain length. We weren't allowed to show our cleavage. We weren't like it was basically extremely modest apparel, and it was very controlling around like how you presented yourself and who you were going to be and how did you show up in in public and those type of things. So like I said, it was controlling for sure.
So were you allowed by this community for you to, for example, talk to other guys, classmates? I'm not talking boyfriend, girlfriend, even interacting, talking with them. Was it something that was allowed or frowned upon?
So it was okay if we talked to them right while we were in school. It was not okay if we talked to them outside of school. So we were allowed to interact with them as little as possible. So as much as we really had to, right? So during the school day, I was allowed to interact with them, but not outside of school. And so the more that I was had those kind of restrictions, the more that I would try to rebel, right? I
Sure,
would try
absolutely.
to, talk to boys outside of, outside of school and that type of thing. And that was always, it caused my parents a lot of heartache because
Sure.
I was kind of not like the exemplary religious student, if you will. I was trying to kind of like break outside the boundaries, right? Because I just felt so confined.
How about sports? Were you allowed to participate in sports in school, or, for example, some, well, when I grew up, sport was part of the curriculum in school. For example, were you able to participate in the sports PE classes or no?
So I was able to do normal PE, but any sports outside of school was frowned upon within the religion because it took time away from actually doing what you're supposed to do in the religion.
Wow.
So a lot of Jehovah's Witness children do not do sports outside of school. They don't do extracurricular activities because of the fact that it's taking away from serving and being a part of the religion. So that's a really big frowned upon thing, as well as college. College is not really something that they try to stress for kids to go to. They actually want you to actually kind of more like sacrifice your life and kind of be someone that is in full-time ministry and has a aspires to be part of something larger within the organization.
So there was no end. There was almost like a lifelong journey. There was no graduation, so to speak. There was no ending. You've paid your dues. Now you can go move on to something else. You were born, and you were meant to continue until you die in that life.
Oh, for sure. Yes. Yeah. And
Wow.
really being self-sacrificing of yourself to really do as much as you possibly can in the organization, right? They want to keep you busy in the organization. They want to keep you busy doing whatever you can. So anything outside of it, it's really frowned upon, right? It looks
Uh-huh.
as if it's extra pleasures that you don't really need.
Sure. Did you have any siblings growing up?
I did. I have a younger brother. He's about 11 years younger than me.
All right. Okay. How was he reacting to that?
He struggled with it as well, to be honest. Yeah, he actually ended up leaving the religion much sooner than I did. He was around 18
Wow.
and
Okay.
I was 35. Yeah. So he kind of figured it out himself a little bit sooner than I did. I had a little bit harder of a time, but yeah, and now he's still not a part of it.
Were you allowed to watch the TV, read your newspapers on your own? You were only allowed to read what they were allowing you to read and watch.
So you're allowed to do all of those things within reason. They tell you not to do any research about the Jehovah's Witness religion outside of their own books, outside of their own library. So anytime you're doing that type of research, it is only said to be there. And then they make you fear doing any research other than what's in their, organization. So for us, it was just ingrained, right, over and over and over that we do not look outside of the organization. We only look in the organization. So, which is kind of crazy, right? Because now with Google and all of these things, like I
Sure.
mean, in social media, I mean, it's going to become more and more apparent because more and more people are awakening to the fact of really what these religions are all about and trying to keep you controlled, and it's all a money making scheme, and all of these things. But I think it's also a piece of realizing that the fear that they instill in you from a young age, right, of don't look outside because you're just going to find people that are trying to stray you from the truth and all of these things. And so it makes you really believe that they have your best interest at heart.
How did your parents end up in that?
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
How did your parents ended up in that? Were they born into that as well?
They were.
Oh
Yeah.
wow. Okay. So generational. Okay.
Yes. Generational. Yes.
And it never occurred to them to break free from that, or they were just too heavily invested into that and that they couldn't walk out from it.
They are still very much involved in it and believe it.
Are they still?
And
Wow. Okay.
yes, yeah. So when I walked away from it, I was walking away from a lifetime of friendships, a lifetime of anybody and everybody I knew, and also my family's support. I knew that going into it. There were times when it was difficult, and I felt like, oh, perhaps I'll just fake being a part of this religion so I don't have to lose all of these things. But then I realized that that wouldn't be being true to myself. I couldn't just live a lifetime of faking. I couldn't live a lifetime of being a part of something that wasn't true to me and wasn't authentic for me and didn't bring me happiness, right? So I was like, I'm going to have to do what I need to do to move forward in my life. And so that's what my choice was.
Being part of that organization and membership, did that provide you with some kind of special benefits? Like, for example, some organization, when you're part of it, it gives you access to other, for example, to schools, to careers, and faster path to promotion that you would not normally have access to. Was that anywhere part of that? That by you being part of that, you would have maybe faster, bigger, easier access to certain careers or jobs or promotions to really advance yourself, or it was all strictly
No,
self-sacrifice?
it was
Okay.
all just self-sacrifice. It was all thinking that we were doing it to basically um, get to be, accepted by God, and that we were, the truth, the one organization. We were the one organization that was God's chosen people, basically. And so what that was for us was we looked at it as we're living our lives for the next life, right? So we were never really truly living because we were just surviving because we thought that there was something more. We thought, oh, we're good in this life and we do what we're supposed to do, what everybody tells us, right? In this religion, and then we're going to be able to go to paradise. So we think, that what it was taught was that Armageddon was going to come, and it was
Oh,
God
okay.
was going to destroy all the evil, and the people that did right, Jehovah's Witnesses that were baptized were going to be able to go into the paradise, right? So that's what we thought. Whether that was that was our end goal.
Wow. At what point did you realize and that hey, there has to be more to life than this, and that when the seed of was planted in your mind that hey, I need to maybe not initially to get out of it, but to explore and find out what's more out there.
Actually, my ex-husband was the one that planted that seed.
Wow.
He was the one that found out some things about the organization
Was
that
he
were
part of the
less.
organization too?
He was, yes,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So it was less than desirable, and upon finding out those things, which were shocking not only to me but to him as well, it led me to do my own further research and to begin to really dig deeper and understand the organization on a completely different level. Because I realized that once I started to kind of dig a little bit deeper, right, I was like, whoa, the things I was uncovering were like mind blowing. I couldn't even believe it. I
Like
was
what?
so
Share at least
shocked.
one or two examples with us.
One is really finding the actual foundation of the organization, right? It's really covered up within the organization of how it really started. There was a lot of people that were in the organization for a long time that actually left because they realized that the organization wasn't really what it was cracked up to be. And then realizing that it actually comes from, different sects of Mormonism and the Seventh Day Adventists. Like it's not just, and we're made to believe it's the truth, right? It's the real organization that God's chosen, that we're the only chosen people in the whole entire world, right? But you're so conditioned and brainwashed to think that that could absolutely be true. I mean, how could 7 million people be the only chosen people that are going to be survive, right? It just makes no sense. And so once I started to dig deeper, I realized how much that didn't make sense within the organization, and realizing that. And I was just like, wow, I can't believe this. I can't believe I didn't figure this out before. But when you are in that state of mind, right, and it's all you know, you've been indoctrinated since birth, right? It's all you've ever known. And so you have to be able to take yourself out of it and peel away and not just have the black and white tunnel vision that I've had for so long, and expand my mind and realize, oh my gosh, the universe is so much bigger than I realized, right? And so it really led me to like a lot of discovering of, where the religion was founded and who founded it, and the whys, and how much the doctrination of it had changed in so many years. And they declared the end of the world was in the 1970s, and then when it didn't happen, so many people fell away, and they're still declaring that we're at the end of the world, right? And they're still losing followers because more and more people are realizing that perhaps there is something more, right? So just kind of becoming open-minded is where it helped me kind of start to search.
Wow. So other than just sacrificing your time and your life, were they also requiring you to contribute financially to be part of the community?
Oh yes, yeah, you're very much conditioned to say to bring, they call it voluntary donations, but I mean it's more like people volunteer their their time, their money. They put money in to make sure that the organization runs well. Um, it is a typical money making organization, just like all the other religions, right? And I'm not here to bash anything. It is what it is, right? It's what man has kind of created, but it is what is there. It's there for a purpose, right? And we bought into it, right? We bought into an idea or a ideology, I guess.
Was there some kind of minimum requirement? Like, for example, you have to put in, say, 20,000 a year or 10%, 20% of your gross income, or it was completely up to the person?
So there really wasn't that. They tried to differentiate themselves from like a other religions where it's like, oh, you got to give a tenth of your whatever. I don't even know honestly of what your income is. They tried to make themselves stand out as different so that they could be right, could call themselves the true organization and whatnot, because they wanted to present themselves as different, right? Because if we thought we were different, then we thought we were the chosen people, right? So they kind of gave it as like, oh, you volunteer, how much you want to give, but kind of really always having talks from the podium and telling people to be like, make sure that you're donating and make sure that you're giving your what you can, everything that you can, because that's what God wants you to do, and all of these things, right? So it was kind of like the guilt around it, like if you didn't, then you felt guilty, like, oh man, I didn't give that, should be donating more, right? I need to help the organization grow so that we can reach more people and get more followers, that type of thing.
So were they, in a way, the leaders preaching the community to live in austerity while they were living in opulence and mansions and all that, or are they at least not?
Um, Not so much where it was like really showy. So the organization really wanted people to stay small, right? They always taught like, kind of money's the root of evil, and
Oh,
make
wow.
sure, we don't think big. We're just here to like, live, survive until the Armageddon and the new system comes. So it was more of like a thought process of that. You didn't really see, I mean, they're not to be said they're not wealthy witnesses. There is, perhaps they came from generational wealth, or they actually, came into the organization later, those type of things. But there is that, but a lot of it is saying live a simple life, right? Just have your means, because your wealth and your abundance is going to come when you make it into the paradise, right? When you make it into the next life, basically.
So were there any foods that you were not allowed to eat, like, for example, pork and alcohol, and like in some religions, or there was no such things?
There was no real boundaries on that. Obviously, drugs were not
Yeah.
okay. That was a matter of where you would be expelled from the congregation, or disfellowshipped is what they called. Over drinking, overeating, all of those things were considered sins. All of the normal sins, right? You were punished for.
So was that to be part of that membership is something that you had to be born into? Was there an opportunity for people that were not born to join in and go through some kind of initiation, or?
Yeah. So once you're born in, right, you
Mhm.
usually, what your next step is to get baptized, and you don't get baptized until a little bit later. It's not like when you're in another religion where you get baptized early on. This is when you make the decision on later in life where you get baptized, and you make that decision, and you meet with the elders of the congregation, and they decide if you are um, of baptism age, and that and understand what is expected of you, right? And then once they decide that you are, then you can get baptized. I was actually baptized when I was 13, I believe. And when I made that decision, which is crazy, they basically say that when you make that decision, you're baptizing yourself and declaring before everybody that you are dedicating your life to God. And so once you do that, you can be disfellowshipped within the congregation, because if you do something wrong or something that is a punishment, then you can be disfellowshipped, which is basically like an excommunication for a period of time. And
Okay.
you're kind of shunned, and you're not talked to. You don't get to, you can walk into the congregation or the church, if you will, but no one will talk to you.
For how
So
long?
until you're reinstated,
And how long would that be?
until the elders decide.
There's
So
no
for
time
me,
frame
I
like
was
you out for like say for example like a sports analogy, you just get out for like say 10 minutes, whatever, you get a penalty, and then after you come back. No?
new. It's not like that
Okay.
at all. It's not like I can go and talk to the elder and be like, "Oh, forgive me, Father, for I have sinned." No, that's not the way it works. You tell your sin, you have to go over it, and then you get to fellowship from the podium, so everybody knows and absolutely understands that you did something wrong. So again, you're feeling guilt and shame because everybody knows it. And then you have to walk the plank, if you will, and you have to be do your good time and service until you get reinstated. So for myself, I was disfellowshipped when I was 16 years old, and I was not reinstated so for almost a year. So I still lived at home at the time, but I lost my friendships in that time. I was very alone. I felt lots of guilt and shame. The abuse in itself around that was really difficult for me because it was very lonely for that year.
Imagine, yeah.
And it was something, again, me feeling left out, right? And but they do that for a purpose because they want you to see that you've done wrong and trying to get back in. And it's but in the meantime, it's very damaging.
Absolutely. What was the reason for for which they kick you out for a year?
I had sex before marriage.
And how did they find out? Because there was no communication. Did someone tell them, or?
My parents were like detectives.
And I guess this was with a boy that was outside of the community,
I
right?
yeah, exactly. And I ended up
Oh,
telling on myself because I just was realizing that I because they make you feel so much guilt and shame. Like if you keep it a secret, like God is like going to punish you, right? If you don't tell the truth. And so I ended up just kind of really tattling on myself, to be honest. And because but my parents were already they were very controlling, right? And so
sure.
they didn't mean to be, right. It was just how they were raised, and that's all
Mhm.
they knew. I don't fault them for it. I don't, but it was the fact that I had to just come clean because there was so much guilt and shame around it.
So when you were at home, so you said when you excommunicated, other members do not talk to you. So when you're coming home at night for dinner, whatever, did your parents still speak to you, or they were also not speaking to you?
So my parents still spoke to me. They were allowed to if we lived within the same home. If I would have been on my own at that time and I would have been in another household, they would have had to not speak with me at all.
Okay.
So I would have been excommunicated from them as well. But the fact that I was still underage and still living at home, I was still able to have conversations with them. So I really only have my parents.
Okay.
Yeah.
So back then, how big was the community, roughly speaking,
For myself, we had a congregation of like, I think maybe 150 people.
in your area?
Um, in my area, yeah. And then within like the statewide, I think it was, in the thousands or something. And so sometimes we would get together in like bigger, larger groups, rather than just the smaller groups. And so, I mean, you get to know a lot of people. It's a small community, right? Everybody
Sure.
knows everybody, and gossip runs fast throughout that because everybody's talking about everybody. Um, that type of feeling. So,
Whoa. This is beyond fascinating. Wow. Now, so you mentioned that your ex-husband was the one to put the seed in your mind to leave. So from the
yeah.
moment that that was done, how long did it take for you until you actually left?
Until I actually left.
Yeah.
Well, it probably, I tried to find my grounding. He told me, and probably it took me a few months. It took me a few months to really start to really come to terms with it because I had a lot of cognitive dissonance, which is
Sure.
like these conflicting beliefs of like, okay, what's true, what's not true. Like I was really having a hard time really grasping the idea of this was actually happening to me. So the more that I started to grasp the idea and be like, okay, that's something that is making sense, I started to realize that I couldn't fake it. You know, I tried to, and I just couldn't do it. You know, and I started to just be like, I have to just walk away completely. You
Did you
know,
have anyone to confide in and talk to at the time about your thoughts and your deeper feeling that you wanted to maybe get out, like your parents or any close friends within the community or even outside of the community?
so outside of the community, yes, but at the same time, nobody really understood, right? Because they weren't walking in my shoes, right? They didn't understand being in that space and then having to remove yourself from that space. So I felt honestly really alone.
Mhm.
And I probably didn't have to feel that alone, right? I didn't realize until later there was a lot of people that are out there that actually are some are actually still in the organization, but they're mentally out. Like they just stay in because they're afraid of leaving, right? They fear what happens, right? What was what happened to me, right? They don't want to lose their family. They don't want to lose the life that they've always known. They don't want to lose the friends that they've had, right? They feel a lot of fear because that's starting over, right? Starting from ground zero,
Sure.
and that's a scary thing. And a lot of people that do that, there's huge depression rates because of that, because starting over is scary, right? Scary. And I know because I was there. So but I didn't realize like there is like a lot of community of those people out there, and if I would have known that, I probably would have kind of got on some of those forums and known I wasn't alone. But I really just kind of did it on my own, and I tried to express to my parents, why I didn't believe it. And, but they couldn't understand it, and it just caused a lot of anger, and they couldn't hear me. They couldn't hear me, and they couldn't hear it. So I was really even more of an outsider, because when you don't believe, you're considered an apostate, and so you're
Yeah.
considered like someone literally from the devil, and like you've gone to the dark side, and you are even more shunned, right? Because the
Sure.
minute you speak up against it or you say your truth, um, it's really,
So,
really frowned upon.
so was there a specific moment that you can remember that was, as we say, the drop that make the bucket overflow, and you said, "Screw that, I'm out," or was it something like progressive over a few months, and you said, enough is enough?
I think it was more progressive. I think I just realized that going and doing it there was so much fakeness in it for me that I couldn't. And I even, I was getting in the middle of divorce, and I had opportunities. I could have remarried back into the religion, right? I could have faked it and just lived that lifestyle, because it would have at least let me keep the life that I had, right? At least would have let me keep my family. But I started to realize how toxic really all of it was. And I started to get more and more awareness around it.
Wow, that's, as I say, that's beyond fascinating. But we'll definitely do a part two. Let's wrap things up now, and we'll definitely do a part two in the next week or so. So thank you for sharing that. We haven't even scratched the surface, as I'm sure there's so much more to talk about, because I have a billion questions right now. But let me process all
Yeah.
of that. We'll watch that. Then I will come back to you at many more questions, and we'll resume that
Okay.
later on. So Brooke, thank you for sharing your beyond fascinating story. I can only imagine how much courage it must have taken you to walk out from it, especially the pressure from the family, the society around you, and all that. So, wow, I can only imagine that. So, listen, I salute you. We're definitely going to do a part two. And
Thank you.
very welcome. Have a wonderful rest of the day for yourself. Take care.
Thank you. You
Bye
too.
bye.